Hey guys, I've been at work and I'm looking forward to really starting this story with you. This is our novel. You already looked last week at the first page or so, and this is called A Long Walk to Water. So we're actually going to read the first chapter today. I'm so excited. And first of all, we need to review just a little bit of the work we did. I'm going to talk about a bit about the story and how we can become better readers of it, walk through the assignment, and then we'll get to the text. Okay, so first of all, let me share my screen with you. This is the quiz I assigned last time. Only one of you actually did it so far, which means that some of you are behind and you really need to go back and do that before you work on the new work I'm giving you. Fortunately, the new work I'm giving you ties in really well with this quiz, and so you should be off to a really great start. So I had you guys look at just the very first page and answer some questions about that. We looked at the map. If you recall, we looked at the map and asked some initial questions about the map. And then I asked you guys to share. Let me pull this up so you can see it. I asked you to share what's the gist in your mind of this story. Just from the very first paragraph, what's the gist of Naya's story? Naya was the girl that was dragging the big plastic container. And so I asked you to share a bit about that. And I'll say this, the guy who did the quiz, you did a great job. You really nailed getting the gist because you listened to the video, you read the text, and you're an awesome reader. So thanks for doing that, sir. The rest of you need to fill it out. What did you notice about the text itself, even without reading the words in detail? And the second question, the key question, what is Naya's story about? Write your first ideas or the gist of what you're reading. We're going to focus quite a bit on gist and what that means. So let me pull up the paper for today. Let me pull this down so we can see it. There we go. I've given you an organizer, and this is exactly the same organizer we're using in class, where you're first of all going to cite the text and show me where in the text it is. And so this would be page 1 or chapter 1 right here. And then after that, I want you to write out here, what is Naya's story about, your first ideas, okay? Now, this is for today's assignment, not last Friday's assignment, so you need to do both. And so just your first idea, what's Naya's, and then after you read more, you'll add in additional ideas about what it's about. So today, you're really going to be focusing on filling out column 3 and filling out columns 4 and 5. What is Salva's story about, your first ideas? What is Salva's story about as you go on? So you're going to read it the first time, think about it, put it down, and we'll keep adding to this document as we carry on. So the first one should just be, boom, your reaction. I'm going to pause after a minute and let you guys fill this out. Once we start, I'll start reading the first page or so. We're going to pause, you're going to fill this out, and then we'll carry on. So does that make some sense? This will be in Google Classroom, and you can look at it, and we'll keep coming back to this document to build a summary or a gist of what you think the story is about and some of the ideas you might have about where it's headed. Okay, that is the assignment, and now let's turn to the book itself. By now, you should have filled out column 1, or let me pause. By now, you should have filled out the quiz, and so if you haven't, again, run back and do that. So let's come in here and turn on my Kindle, my book reader. Chapter 1, Southern Sudan, 2008. Going was easy. Going, the big plastic container held only air. Tall for her 11 years, Naya could switch the handle from one hand to the other, swing the container by her side, or cradle it in both arms. She could even drag it behind her, bumping it against the ground and raising a tiny cloud of dust with each step. There was little weight going. There was only heat, the sun already baking the air, even though it was long before noon. It would take her half the morning if she didn't stop on the way. That's the chunk we read already, and what I'm going to ask you to do is to make sure now that you fill out the very first column. I'm going to switch it over here. The very first column, or very second column, what is Naya's story about? What is Naya's story about, your first ideas? Okay. Now that you've done that, let's move back to our book, and let's keep reading. Southern Sudan, 1985. Salva sat cross-legged on the bench. He kept his head turned toward the front, hands folded, back perfectly straight. Everything about him was paying attention to the teacher. Everything except his eyes and his mind. His eyes kept flicking toward toward the window through which he could see the road. The road home. Just a little while longer, a few minutes more, and he would be walking on that road. The teacher droned on with the lesson about the Arabic language. Salva spoke the language of his Dinka tribe at home, but in school he learned Arabic, the official language of the Sudanese government far away to the north. 11 years old on his last birthday, Salva was a good student. He already knew the lesson, which was why he was letting his mind wander down the road ahead of his body. So now I want you to pause the video and look for the gist and fill it out right here in column 4. Are you with me? Column 4, what is Salva's story about? And you're welcome to just fill that out, your quick ideas about what the story is about. And then once you've done that, come back and we'll pick up the video again. Okay, let's continue reading Salva's story now that you've given your initial idea, the gist of what you think it might be about, the story of Salva. Salva was well aware of how lucky he was to be able to go to school. He could not attend the entire year because during the dry season, his family moved away from their village. But during the rainy season, he could walk to the school, which is only half an hour away from his home. Salva's father was a successful man. He owned many head of cattle and worked as their village's judge. An honored, respected position. Salva had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. As each boy reached the age of about 10 years, he was sent off to school. Salva's older brothers, Arik and Ring, had gone to school before him. Last year, it had been Salva's turn. His 2 sisters, Akit and Agnath, did not go to school. Like the other girls in the village, they stayed home and learned from their mother how to keep house. Most of the time, Salva was glad to be able to go to school. But some days, he wished he were still back at home herding cattle. He and his brothers, along with the sons of his father's other wives, would walk with the herds to the water holes where there was good grazing. Their responsibilities depended on how old they were. Salva's younger brother, Kual, was taking care of just 1 cow. Like his brothers before him, he would be in charge of more cows every year. Before Salva had begun going to school, he had helped look after the entire herd and his younger brother as well. The boys had to keep an eye on the cows, but the cows did not really need much care. That left plenty of time to play. Salva and the other boys made cows out of clay. The more cows you made, the richer you were. But they had to be fine, healthy animals. It took time to make a lump of clay look like a good cow. The boys would challenge each other to see who could make the most and best cows. Other times, they would practice with their bows and arrows, shooting at small animals or birds. They weren't very good at this yet, but once in a while they got lucky. Those were the best days. When one of them managed to kill a ground squirrel or a rabbit, a guinea hen or a grouse, the boys' aimless play halted, and there was suddenly a lot of work to do. Some of them gathered wood to build a fire. Others helped clean and dress the animal. Then they roasted it on the fire. None of this took place quickly. Salva had his own opinion of how the fire should be built and how long the meat needed to cook, and so did each of the others. "The fire needs to be bigger." "It won't last long. We need more wood." "No, it's big enough already. Quick, turn it over before it's ruined." The juices dripped and sizzled. A delicious smell filled the air. Finally, they couldn't wait 1 more second longer. There was only enough for each boy to have a few bites, but oh, how delicious those bites were. Salva swallowed and turned his eyes back toward the teacher. He wished he hadn't recalled those times because the memories made him hungry. Milk. When he got home, he would have a bowl of fresh milk, which would keep his belly full until supper time. He knew just how it would be. His mother would rise from her work grinding meal and walk around to the side of the house that faced the road. She would shade her eyes with one hand, searching for him. From far off, he would see her bright orange headscarf, and he would raise his arm in greeting. By the time he reached the house, she would have gone inside to get his bowl of milk ready for him. Crack! The noise had come from outside. Was it a gunshot or just a car backfiring? The teacher stopped talking for a moment. Every head in the room turned toward the window. Nothing. Silence. The teacher cleared his throat, which drew the boys' attention to the front of the room again. He continued the lesson from where he had left off. Then, crack, pop, pop, crack! Gunfire. Everyone down, the teacher shouted. Some of the boys moved at once, ducking their heads and hunching over. Others sat frozen, their eyes and mouths wide open. Salva covered his head with his hands and looked from side to side in panic. The teacher edged his way along the wall to the window. He took a quick peek outside. The gunfire had stopped, but now people were shouting and running. Go quickly, all of you, the teacher said, his voice low and urgent. Into the bush. Do you hear me? Not home. Don't run home. They will be going into the villages. Stay away from the villages. Run into the bush. He went to the door again and looked out. Go, all of you, now! The war had started 2 years earlier. Salva did not understand much about it, but he knew that the rebels from the southern part of Sudan, where he and his family lived, were fighting against the government, which was based in the north. Most of the people who lived in the north were Muslim, and the government wanted all of Sudan to become a Muslim country, a place where the beliefs of Islam were followed. But the people in the south were of different religions and did not want to be forced to practice Islam. They began fighting for independence from the north. The fighting was scattered all around southern Sudan, and now the war had come to where Salva lived. The boys scrambled to their feet. Some of them were crying. The teacher began hurrying the students out the door. Salva was near the end of the line. He felt his heart beating so hard that its pulse pounded in his throat and his ears. He wanted to shout, I need to go home, I must go home. But the words were blocked by the wild thumping in his throat. When he got to the door, he looked out. Everyone was running. Men, children, women, carrying babies. The air was full of dust that had been kicked up by all those running feet. Some of the men were shouting and waving guns. Salva saw this with one glance. Then he was running too, running as hard as he could into the bush, away from home. That's our chapter for the day. Just one final reminder, what I need you to do is to go through and look at column 1. Note that it says chapter 1. You just write chapter 1 on there. And then Naya's story, the girl with the water container. What do you think that's about? Any new ideas you've had when you reviewed it? And then column 4, what's Salva's story about? Your first ideas. And now, having read the whole first chapter, I want you to write any new ideas. Once you finish that up, make sure you click submit and mark it as done in Google Classroom. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoy the first chapter of the story. We'll be back with more tomorrow.